My family, they always really praised Jesus, talked about God. It was something that I didn't really see myself in. I saw it as their belief, not mine. I thought it of a task. I had gotten put in jail when I was 17. I never fully understood what I was going through. I came out pansexual, which means all of a sudden you don't really care about the gender anymore. It's just about the personality, or a good sexual chemistry. I always knew it was super easy, and like a lot of people say adult film industry, you picture like girls paying guys to watch them do things, right? And it's just not the case. A lot of the guy stuff in the adult film industry, or solo content, or even like duo content with like guys or girls, it's watched by predominantly males. I had probably like 20,000 viewers on my personal platform, and they were mostly dudes. I moved down to California. I was kind of in the city of sin all of a sudden. I knew that I could get guys super easily. Like me walking into a bar, like a gay bar, I get free drinks all night. I knew what I had. I knew I could look okay to these guys. So as a child, I was adopted at birth. I was born into a family who adopted me from Arizona, who are my parents today and who I call family today. They basically took me in. My birth mom was too young to take care of me. She was about 16, 17. There was no father involved, so she knew she couldn't do it. My grandma really decided hey, I want to keep this kid, but overall she said, hey, no, I'm going to get rid of it, or me, I guess. So she ended up putting me up for adoption. My family kind of grabbed me at birth, and I was born into a very Christian household. My family, they always really praised Jesus, talked about God, took us to Bible studies, church all the time, and it was just really a big part of the life, but it was something that I didn't really see myself in. I saw it as their belief, not mine. I thought it of a task, right? It was a task to me, something I had to do, more of a chore, right? Your dad would tell you to pull the weeds, and you're like, man, I don't want to do that. That was definitely something that was exactly what I thought about the church, I thought of the Christians as a judgmental, hypocritical, just not good people. I thought that they just weren't going to be the people I wanted to surround myself with, because every time I ran into someone from the way I was raised, they just felt like they had to judge you or tell you something about what you were doing. I grew up with a sister too. She was a little bit older than me. She was also adopted. And it was one of those things where we were kind of close. We had similar beliefs in an extent, but at the same time, we weren't really very similar at all. She was adopted from Seattle. I was adopted from California. So we were a little bit close growing up, but again, she was kind of pushed into it as well. She was pushed into the belief of Christianity, pushed into the belief of, you have to believe this. I actually told my dad at one point when he asked me, where are you at with your walk with Jesus? And I told him, I said, hey, I don't know anything about any other religion, so how am I supposed to decide on which religion is right? I was like, I couldn't tell you why I think Mormons are wrong, but you guys have taught me to believe that my whole life. I couldn't tell you why Catholics are wrong. You guys have taught me to believe that my whole life too. So it's like, I don't know who I am to decide what religion is right when I don't even know why a religion is wrong. So that was one of the things that I would always hold on to. I started growing up, and when I was kind of hitting my teen years, and you actually said this the night I saved, is I walked away from Jesus when I was 9th grade, and that's something that you had said to me, but it was crazy because I really did just turn my back and run. My sister was always the problem child growing up, so they thought, my parents at least. They always thought that, hey, she's the one who's, doing this, or doing that. And I kind of was just like sliding underneath the rug for the longest time until I wasn't. And one day it all came out. Blake's doing drugs, Blake's doing this, Blake's doing that. And it kind of just hit them really hard, kept catching me for things. I wasn't sneaky. I did it out of the sheer will of my heart because it's what I wanted to do. I didn't really care if they caught me. I would say, hey, I'm gonna go sleep over at my friend's house. And then I'd be up in Chelan, like at a house Project X type party, and just like partying, getting caught by the police and stuff like that. And you can't really hide that type of stuff. I'd throw parties at my house, and my parents could tell. It's easy to tell when there's like 200 people in your house, and certain things are probably missing. Nothing's even the same. I didn't know how to put things back in the right way. So it was pretty crazy to think, and I grew up that way as well. I started hanging out with a bunch of people my freshman year. Well, I guess let's backtrack a little bit. I was homeschooled till halfway through 8th grade. I came out of 8th grade, And I really was like, hey mom, I want to go to public school. And this was pre like blow up of my life. I said, I want to go to public school. I want to be able to have friends. I want to be able to start dating, because I said, if you can't date, how are you supposed to practice for marriage? And that was my biggest thing. It was like, how am I going to know if I like these girls or not? I was like, I'm just going to meet the first girl ever and be like, man, she's the one, but not know anything about them. And so my mom finally agreed during a big fight with my sister, like, hey, you can get out of here. You can go to public school. So my parents let me go. I went through at the end of 8th grade. I took that last year. I had my first girlfriend where I dated her for 45 minutes, which was one period. It was really interesting. We just started dating, and then I was like, afterwards, I was like, nah. So the next period we talked, and we're like, nope, no more. So that was kind of like my 8th grade. I was like socially awkward a little bit, didn't really know how to, interact with people. I had played a bunch of sports and stuff like that. I was always athletic, but it got to the point where I got in high school, 3 of our schools merged together, right? So it turned into one big 4,004 for a high school. And I didn't really know that many people, I had my sports friends, but they all had their groups from all these different places that they had known since just they were kids, right? So I started hanging out with these guys who kind of just like adopted me basically into their crew. And a lot of people, when you see these people at school, you're like, that's the drug addict circle, right? And for me, I was hanging out with these guys, started smoking weed when I was 14. I'd already started getting tattoos when I was 14. It ended up just being these people who just really wanted me to try things. It started off as seniors who were 18, and as I progressed, to my sophomore year, all my friends had been to prison, were on DOC for trafficking of arms and stuff like that, drugs. I lived with my heroin dealer for quite some time. And it was just crazy because I was no longer hanging out with people in high school. I was a 16-year-old kid hanging out with people who were like 28 to 35. A lot of it was seeking the validation. I had a lot of abandonment issues from and I didn't even realize I had these abandonment issues, but from being adopted, I had felt left. Things that I actually told my parents, is I hate you guys. I wish you never adopted me. You're the worst parents in the world. I wish I had my birth mom, and I'd only ever met her once. I didn't know anything about her. I didn't know about anything. I never really thought about the sacrifice that my parents put into me, to just raise me as the person I am. That was part of it, but I think the rest of it was just seeking that validation. I was seeking validation from people, from drugs, from feelings, from girls. Any attention I could get at that time was just amazing because I felt like I had a circle. And I think that's what I was really, really searching for at the deep down part of it, was looking for some type of community. And I found it very quickly. I was very influential. I was very susceptible to peer pressure, which is something I'm glad I'm not now. So you could try to peer pressure me all day long now, and good luck. I'm not going to do it if I don't want to. But when you're 14 and these 28-year-olds have cars, they can get you into bars, they can get you booze, they can get you any drugs you want. They're pretty cool people, they basically had everything you couldn't get until you're 21. It was really cool to hang out around that circle just because it was just easy. Yeah, access, I could do all these things. They really had a good time with me because as somebody who's in the drug world, you like teaching people about how to get high. You like teaching people how to do new things. It's very interesting. So the first wall I hit, I basically had there was a bunch of lead up into these walls that I hit, but the first one was I had been in this really bad spot, and I had been in treatment for my 18th year. I had gotten put in jail when I was 17. I got charged as an adult, but I turned 18 while I was in the processing of it, so I went to big boy jail. And they put me in there, and I didn't really have a date of release yet. I was lucky to only be in there for about 2 weeks. Only reason I got out early though is because when I was in there, I realized I need treatment. I was shooting heroin at the time. I was doing coke. I actually got arrested for a probation violation for testing positive for every narcotic that you could possibly test for on one single test. I tested positive for Molly. I tested positive for cocaine, heroin, meth, weed, alcohol, all that type of stuff. And I wasn't supposed to do any of it. I had faked a drug test like a week before they caught it. Again, not sneaky, called me back in, and I ran from it, so I had a warrant for my arrest. And one night that I'll never forget is I hadn't seen my parents in about probably 3 months. I had run away from home. My parents didn't know where I was. They knew I was on drugs. They knew I was trapping out. And I called them. I was in a parking lot. I just remember being 114 pounds. The same size, the same height, sitting in a parking lot talking to my parents and being like, hey, I just want you guys to know tomorrow I'm turning myself in. I'm going to be in jail. And the next time I saw my parents after that, they hugged me and, cried with me and told me they loved me. But the next time I saw my parents after that, I was in shackles and handcuffs sitting in front of a judge in the courthouse. And I think that's the hardest thing I've ever had to see, because after telling my parents how much I hated them, you see like yourself just sitting there, humbled, super, super humbled, to the point where there's not much more that you could wish that your parents don't see you as. I just remember the judge being like, hey, dude, like, you don't get your life together, you're going to be here for a long time. I got lucky, I got out. Didn't get lucky, and again, all of this, I never got lucky. Truly looking back at it now, I've been blessed, been saved, and I've been looked over. But I got out, I got an instant release where my mom had to take me to the airport after 14 days, straight from jail, flew me to California straight away, and I had to be admitted to an intensive inpatient program. And I had to be admitted into this program it was probably like a 4-month program that I was supposed to do. I get to this program, and it was up in Lake Arrowhead in Southern California, and it gets shut down within like 6 days for insurance fraud. Like, people are like running around this treatment center, just like packing everything up, saying, here's your guys' phones, here's your guys' medications, here's like everything that we weren't supposed to have, having come out of like these things. And they just basically said, good luck, right? So I had met these people down there, some guy who really looked after me, his name was Taylor, and he just basically took care of everything. He's like, I'm gonna get you into the place with me. He's like, you're gonna come with us. I had another guy, he also came with us and got us into a treatment center. But it was crazy because 6 days in, I'm supposed to be in this intensive inpatient program, and I suddenly have my phone, my drugs, like everything, and I have freedom. So we go to this new treatment center, and I don't know if you know anything about the like treatment program stuff, but it's very sketchy and scandalous. They basically sell humans down there for like $6,000 a piece. They'll pay you to relapse for thousands of dollars, right? They'll give a drug addict who's addicted to heroin $4,000 to relapse, and then go into a treatment center that they're paid by. So once they get admitted into it and they get paid out, they give you the cash. Half the time they don't give people the cash though. So it's a little bit scary, but I ended up getting on this guy's like bus, and he took me to this place, and it was like a very, very low end treatment center at a high end scale type of resort type of thing. So we had our own apartments, we had like our own little area, we could go anywhere we wanted. All I had to do was sign a slip, get drug tested when I came back. Right, so it gave us, I was supposed to have no freedom, and I got to this place and I had all the freedom in the world. I did that for a little bit, and I'll never forget down there, I had this guy, and we were at a Starbucks, and we were walking around the Starbucks, and we found a Bible just sitting there on the table. And we were in a really bad spot in our life, and he was like this like very like emo guy, which was fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but he was very satanic, right? And he's like, well, we should burn this Bible. And I said, hell yeah, let's burn this Bible, So we took this Bible, we lit it on fire, and we threw it in the garbage. Knowing something in my head that whole entire time, that's something I carried with me for a long time, to be like, I could never be a Christian again because of that. I could never believe in God because of that. And I was like, I literally took his word, lit it on fire, and threw it away, So I was like, how am I ever supposed to open a book that has his words in it? So they let us out of there. I knew myself, and I was like, you know what? I can't be in something that has, this much, I don't even know how to say the word. Like, I couldn't have this much freedom. I was like, there's no way you should have me this much freedom. So they admitted me into a different program where I was always a good student. I was always really good at, kind of just having to be there. I'll just be sober, whatever. But it kind of got boring after a while, and about 5 months in, my buddy who originally got me into the treatment center said, hey, come hang out with me at my hotel room. I just got out of treatment. And I thought he was sober, until the second I got there, and he was shooting heroin, smoking weed, and he shot me up in my arm. The first one he missed, so it was kind of just like in my body. I had just like this like really giant bump on my arm because he was so drunk he couldn't even shoot me up, right? And so I ended up having to shoot myself up for the first time in a while, and I saw this guy kind of just go off the rails. I quickly got myself back into a treatment program, got sober again, relapsed again, ended up moving back up to Washington, coming back down to California. And it was just like a whole cycle. I was in treatment from 18 to 19 for a whole entire year, just hopping and hopping around. I think I was in 11 different programs. And I couldn't stay sober. I finally got back up to Washington and I had 4 months sober. The day I moved up to Washington, I smoked weed. It's basically all of it gone, and it was for nothing. So after I moved up to Washington, I started working at this Red Robin, and I worked there for 6 years, but I was a line cook at Red Robin, and I started getting back into drinking, doing coke, started like just doing all these drugs all the time with all my friends, and who I thought were my friends at least. Started getting into like partying and raving, but they didn't really know the actual issues that I dealt with in my past. So I was taking Xanax on the side. They would take like 2 points of Molly. I'd do like 15. I couldn't throttle the amount of drugs that I would do because I would always do them to the point where I wanted to be on the verge of either death, but as high as I possibly could be.
Wow.
You know, it was never like, let's get a little bit high. It's, if we're gonna get high, we're gonna get super high to the point where we don't understand how to function, because that's what we were chasing. You know, and my friends who I really truly got high with, that's how it was. One night, I ended up getting so like drunk at this bar who served me when I was 19. You know, they didn't ID check me. It was Valentine's Day. I got super, super drunk at this bar. I decided to drive home, you know, and that was my first mistake. You know, it was never something I had ever been caught for before, drinking and driving. It's not something I did it pretty regularly, but it's not like I was driving super far distances in my head. I was like, I live 2 miles away from here. I can get here pretty easily. I was at Earl's. I took the back road of Bellevue Way going up towards basically the 405 entrance. And I lived right by the 405 entrance, so it's not that far. It's probably like 2-3 miles. I was in an Infiniti Q50 at the time because I always worked and I was always still making money, but I was a functioning addict, you know, at times. Call out, you know, from 2 jobs. I had 2 jobs, so I could call out from one if I was too tired. I'd go to the other one, but if I was doing both, I was doing a bunch of drugs, you know, like doing coke to stay up, going through to try to stay alive. But I ended up going 120 down this road. It was a 25 school zone. I hit 120, blew a stop sign, hit a curb, took about 3 feet of air, an electrical wire, cut the axles off of my car, dropped down 10 feet and hit a house at 120. I should have died at that point. I walked out of there. I got out of the car, had a bottle of alcohol in my hand. I threw it, probably not very far, so they probably found it. And I started running. You know, I was a couple blocks away from my house, and I was like, I'm just gonna go home, I'm gonna sleep. I know this is gonna kill me the next day. I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. So my goal was just to go home, get a good night's sleep. I didn't realize I had been knocked out for as long as I did, and I also didn't think anyone had woken up because all the lights were off. But I knocked out 3 blocks of power in that area, so they couldn't turn any lights on. So I hit a main electrical power box. So I got out of my car. At first, I actually had turned my car into reverse, and I went to get out of my car, and I was like, or try to drive it. And I was like, well, I want to drive. Like, because I thought I had just bumped into something. And I finally came to a little bit, and all my airbags were deployed. I was like, I didn't even know there were airbags there. But there's airbags everywhere in this car. And I opened the door, and it wouldn't open. And I like finally get it open, and I like had dug out some of the ground. My car was in the ground. My wheels and axles were like shot left and right. And none of my car was really where it should have been. You know, I was like, wait a minute, this makes sense why my car won't move now. It doesn't even have wheels. So I get out again, I threw the bottle, I started running. Cops pulled up, they had canines out, you know, basically told me to get on the ground and they're gonna bite me. So I stopped, they arrested me, they took me to SCORE. I spent a night in jail that night. And I said, you know what, like I'm messing up my life, but I didn't care. I got out of jail. I had a huge thing where they misdiagnosed me and said I didn't have a concussion. I ended up having an extreme concussion, but out of everything, I walked out with a concussion. That was it. I had no scrapes, I had no bruises, you know, I had no broken bones. I was fine. And the paramedics were like, how did you survive? And they say it's because I was so drunk that my body was so limp on impact that it just couldn't affect, because I was lucky with the airbags, and I also just had enough alcohol in my system that my body wasn't stiff and it didn't try to stop anything, and it was just full bang. But my head got beat up pretty bad, and I just didn't stop doing drugs. I didn't have insurance on that car, so I ended up owing about $40,000. No insurance on property damage. was about $15,000. Now I needed a DUI lawyer. I needed to go to outpatient treatment. My job put me on, on leave for being an addict. So I started buying a ton of drugs, just sitting in my house, drinking a 30 rack every day. I was doing Molly, Coke, heroin, basically anything you could possibly do, just sitting in my room alone. So I basically got into the drugs and alcohol when I started going to high school. I found that circle that you had said, basically a circle of people, who gave me validation, who wanted to hang out, who were just kind of down to do whatever. And I was always a very just like, I'm down type of guy. I was like, let's do it. So I just started hanging out with these people, and they always had the drugs, and it was always just one more drug that they had. And every person I met was just another person who had another drug. So I'd go to these houses, people were smoking a bunch of weed and hash and all this type of stuff, and they're like, hey, you should try this hash. I'm like, well, I smoked weed, what's hash? So I'd smoke the hash, I'm like, that's pretty crazy. And they're like, hey, you should try this gravity bong at my friend's house. We'd go over and try this gravity bong at the friend's house, and that friend would be like, yeah, I have a little bit of Coke too. And you're like, so you're doing these Coke things. But I found as I progressed through my time with these friends, it got to a point where I got kicked out of my group with the weed people because I was doing too many drugs. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did I get that far? And then I'd be hanging out with the people who did cocaine, or just like snorting lines all the time, and I'd get kicked out of that group. It's like, man, this guy does too many drugs, because I couldn't stop. Most people could sit down and, snort a couple lines of Coke or a gram of Coke and just kind of just walk, My buddy and I vividly remember one night right after the car accident, we did 16 grams of Coke in one night. Like lethal amounts of drugs. To the point where you're shaking and you're trembling, but you're like, this is fantastic. And then so we'd get kicked out of that group, or I would hang out with my friends, and I'd be like, man, these people can't do as many drugs as me, so I got to find new friends, But it was just the introduction through other friends of other friends who brought me into new drugs. And the more I got into it, the better it was. And I remember one day my buddy asking me, who turned out to be my heroin dealer later, he said, have you ever tried like meth? And I was like, no, because him and I had just been smoking weed and drinking together, and he was going to get me on an Alaskan boat, and we were going to do a bunch of like fishing stuff out there and make a bunch of money. So I was hanging out with him all the time. I remember opening his drawer one day, and I was like, looked in the drawer, and there's like this little black substance in a bag. And I knew he did drugs, but I never really knew what he did. And I was like, dude, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's black tar heroin. And I laughed. I was like, oh, that's funny. And he's like, no, for real, it's black tar heroin. And I was like, oh, okay. And he goes, have you ever tried it? And I was like, no, I've never tried it. I was 16 at the time. I was like, never tried it. He's like, what about meth or anything like that? And I was like, no, I never tried that. He goes, would you ever try it? And in high school, my buddy and I, we consider ourselves drug connoisseurs. That was what we thought. We'll try any drug once just to see how it feels, and it turns into 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, people are like, oh, have you ever done Molly? I'm like, probably like over 150 times, 200 times. Like, yes, we've done it a bunch. And so he was like, well, would you want to try it? And I was like, yeah, I guess I'll try it, So I remember the first time he, shot up his needle, pulled it back and shot it into my arm for me. And I was just sitting there in complete euphoria, basically. And it was just crazy, because then he was like, well, you want to smoke some meth too? I was like, well, yeah, so I'm already like in it, might as well do them both. So he's like, well, we can do it together, and I was like, okay. So he started shooting me up with all these different drugs. I wasn't really sure what was happening with it. And he's like, well, have you ever smoked Coke? He's like, it's called pasties. You put baking soda on it, you smear it on a foil, and you just smoke trails of it. So we started doing that as well, and it just came every single day that we were either smoking Coke off of foil, freebasing cocaine, we started smoking crack, just doing all these different types of drugs. And that's kind of really where it kicked in, because I couldn't stop. Yeah. There was no way for me to stop, and I looked up to this dude like a god, because he was just so cool to me. And then we would support our type of addiction, because I had a job so I could pay for some of the stuff. But I started selling to my friends Molly, but my Molly that I sold to them was meth. So I remember 3 guys that I sold to in a hotel one time hit me up a little bit after, and they were like, yo, this is meth, bro. One of them went to a treatment center a couple days after that because of it. And then another guy ended up just kind of like freaking out, losing his marbles. But we were selling drugs to people that we knew was not what we were selling. I had gotten out of that car accident, and I started using a lot of drugs. You know, I remember one time my friend came over and she was supposed to like help me. I was laying in bed, I was just messed up. I remember I had gone to court one day. I actually don't remember I went to court, but I was dating a girl at the time, and I woke up in a frenzy. I was like, oh my goodness, we need to go to court. And she's like, no, you already went. What do you mean? I was like in my clothes. I was like, wait a minute. I had gone to court. My lawyer saw me. I had gone in. I had taken like 6 bars of Xanax. I didn't remember anything. And I was just like falling over the place. And he went in, got me in a continuance, and then he got me out of there. And he's like, go home. Don't come back like this. You're going to go to jail. You know? And so my girlfriend at the time was like, yeah, no, you went to court. You know? And I was like, wow, thanks for getting me there. I guess. So it was kind of crazy, but one of my other friends came over a couple days later, and I had just drank a bunch, and I was on drugs. I had drugs stashed everywhere. You know, like anywhere in my house you could find drugs, because anywhere I wanted to be able to, if someone stole them, I wanted to have more. You know, you can't take all of my drugs, because I will freak out. You know, I remember one time I was driving up to Renton to pick up some Coke, and I picked up my Coke, and I only had picked up 2 grams at this time, and I was snorting it out of the bag while I was driving, and my hand slipped. I almost took the whole bag up my nose at once, which is about 1 gram, and I remember calling my dealer right there, and while I was shaking, I was like, hey, I need to come back and get some more, because I almost did all my drugs, and I needed to pace these out for the next like 3 hours, you know, because I had done them too quick. It was an accident. I was like, but I need more, you know, so you can't just stop because it's the fear of it ending. And it just becomes so ridiculously like addictive, you know, and it's an endless cycle. But I ended up going to a rave and messing my head up really, really badly after that car accident, because I took 15 points of Molly, which is a lethal amount. I lost my sense of hearing in the concert. You know, I was looking around, and all of a sudden, you know, I couldn't hear anything. You know, it was dead silent in a place that's designed to rock your ears to pieces. You know, it was just shocking to me, and I kind of realized, and I ended up going home with this dude that night, and I had him bring me a bunch of drugs, and then he was like, hey, let's hang out, you want to like snuggle? And I said, no, get out of here. I just wanted your drugs, you know, and that was basically what that was. And the giant kick to me that really brought me to getting better the first time and sober, and not even better like physically or emotionally, it was just bringing me to the sober point, was my friend came over, and she saw how messed up I was. She took my beer out of my hand, turned it upside down, and poured it on the ground, threw the can on the ground, and said, clean it up. And I was like, no, you clean it up. Like, you poured it, and she's like, no, you clean it up, or it's going to stay there. Right? And she wanted to know that she thought I was a piece of crap, you know? She's like, and it was a very good thing for her to do, because she was just basically saying, like, you're messing your life up. And I had gone to the bathroom while she was there, and I came back, and on my bed, I had a bunch of Coke and drugs, like, stashed down between, like, the mattress and the bed frame. I put my hand down there. I couldn't feel anything. I looked at her, I said, what did you do? What have you done? And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, what have you done? And then I felt my drugs, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about, you know? And she was confused, but I was so ready to just rock her world, you know, because I thought she had taken my life support, you know? So that's kind of what humbled it there. I ended up blacking out again that same night, and I had a bag of 20 bars of Xanax, and I woke up in the morning, and it was all gone. I had taken 20 bars of Xanax. I had started withdrawing on benzodiazepines, which is super dangerous. My girlfriend at the time had been in my bed, and I was just shaking. I couldn't stop. I was dope sick. The benzos were coming off, and I went to go get more, and I was like, they're all gone. I've done them all, you know, and I had to go. I didn't go to the hospital for it, but I checked myself into an inpatient treatment center, and was like, it's time to get right, because if I don't, I'm not going to. And I was probably 19 at that time. Yeah, about 19. And I told my dad, I said, hey, I could go to an inpatient treatment center, but I'm a really good student. I'll do anything well. So I got to learn how to live it. I was like, I got to learn how to keep my job, you know, keep my place that I'm living, and understand how to actually be a normal functioning person of society. Otherwise, I'm going to get out of another treatment center again and just go straight back into a hole, So I did that, and I ended up getting a lot better through that and just kind of stopped using, and that kicked me off for about almost 6 years of sobriety.
Wow.
Right? And I was sober for about 6 years. Wow. But, I mean, when you're not with God and stuff like that, it doesn't make a difference on whether you're using or not, I was just now a really smart, sober, messed up person. Kind of leading out of the drugs and starting when I was a kid. So after 14 and 15, I started using a bunch of drugs. That's when I really started like getting tattooed heavily. And my parents, I started running away from home every day. I'd be gone for months at a time. I would tell my friends' parents lies, and they'd be like, well, your parents can't even come get us from the house. Like, if they try to come get you, I won't let them, because I fed them lies, So it became my parents were the villains. My parents are just great people. It's hard to see, like, man, I really treated them like crap. I treated them like they were nothing. And I started, this is kind of where I feel like it not necessarily rolled into the adult film industry, but it kind of started like breaking down my emotional state for it, right? Any sense of worth that I had gained, I started to lose because I started working at McDonald's when I was 16. My best friend, his dad owned like 5 McDonald's. So it was just super easy. I mean, he was the guy whose house we were at all the time doing drugs, whatever, because he had a movie theater in his house. Like, he had pools. He had like 5 levels. Like, his dad, like, one of our friends stole 10 grand out of his dad's pocket one time, and they got in a lot of trouble for it. But his dad was so rich that he had 10 grand in his pocket, like, regularly. It was just like stupid, He had boats, side-by-sides, 4-wheelers, like anything you could possibly want to do while you're high, he had it, And that's why we were all there. And he wasn't necessarily the guy we liked to hang out with, but he had the stuff. So I started working at McDonald's. I don't know what it was about McDonald's and the managers there, but that's when it really started to kick my self-worth down a little bit, So I had my first manager. He was 36, this gay man, and I was 16, bro, and he would pay me to touch me through my pants, in his car, for like $100, And I thought I was on top at the time, I was like, I made $100, this is easy. I had already thought maybe that I was just trying to like find where I fit in the most, and so it seemed like I fit in here. Like, all these guys thought I was very attractive, and I was like, you know what, this is kind of cool. I thought I was winning. I didn't really realize that I was being used. And then the other manager, who was, I think, probably 25 at the time, he started like buying me things. Like, he would buy me like weed pens, like anything I wanted, just like give me money, and just to send him pictures, And I don't think I ever realized, at the time, like, it's super illegal and it's like super pedophile-like, that they were doing this type of stuff. But again, I thought I was winning. I didn't think anything bad of it, but until a little bit later in life where I was like, wow, that's really messed up. And so, yeah, it was crazy, because even today, like, not today, but over the past year, they would still hit me up. They were some of the main subscribers and first subscribers on the OnlyFans that I had. They were really, really just like prominent people. They always sent me money, and I had known them for so long that I knew how to use them. I knew how to pull all their strings. I knew how to get exactly everything I wanted from them. But it started off young, and that kind of made me feel like I was a little bit less than myself, because I could sell myself for things. So, it started with sending pictures, and then it started kind of just going into me just not really caring anymore. And there's a little bit more I'll tell you in order to get there. So I ended up, because of the confusion of these men, in my life, and what I thought I was doing was, it felt weird, it never felt like, oh, this is great, like I'm doing something right. It always felt weird, but it was just something that happened, and I continued on the train, and I started talking to one of my, not even friends, just this guy. He was the only gay guy really in our high school, and I started feeling emotions like, am I gay? Like, am I enjoying this? Am I not? Like, what is happening? So I started talking to him, and I kind of was just trying to be honest with him and say, like, hey, I don't know if I'm interested in men, but like, I don't honestly know if I'm not. And he outed me to the whole entire school that I was gay. And I got so much flack for it, like, I had friends, like, we were the very, like, straight male, like alpha male, like guys in high school. You know, I was like the big druggie in high school, and all of a sudden, like, I might be gay, you know? So the whole school, especially living in Wenatchee, it was not an area where you're like pro LGBTQ, you know? It was like, oh, you're LGBTQ? Get out of here. So I ended up having to transfer high schools. I've never told my parents that as being the reason why I left high school, and went to a different high school, but I got outed and I felt so uncomfortable. A bunch of my friends, like all of them, like stopped talking to me. And the only ones who didn't really hear about it were the 28, 29-year-olds who I was doing drugs with, so they were the easy ones to stay with. So I went to Cashmere High School. My parents, by goodness grace, let me go there because it was just so hard for me to be at the other one. There was always drama, always gossip, always this, always that. And I didn't even know if that was true for me yet, you know? And I was like, you know, I don't even know if this is really true. And it wasn't until about 19, where I came out as fully gay, you know? And I thought I had walked through a bunch of trauma with it in treatment. I talked to a bunch of people. I dated a guy from 19 to like 20, basically. And I felt like I had to fit and conform within a society, right? I remember going to a rave, and the reason why I think I really felt like I was living this false identity, or this identity that I wanted to be in, was because I saw these people who just really didn't care. There were all these free spirit people who had all of these, like, who cares what they think? Who cares what they think? And I was like, man, I really want that. You know, I really want to be careless of what people think of me, you know, because I care too much sometimes, you know. That's something I'm really good at now, is like, I don't care what people think about me. But it was at the time, I was like, I really, really wanted, you know, that sense of community again. And it was, again, that community that I searched for, and it's the community I found. I ended up conforming into this really weird version of myself from 19 to 20, where I was wearing makeup, like doing all these crazy things. It's not me at all. And it was just weird because I felt like I had to conform within what I thought to be the LGBTQ community and what it was like to be gay, right? And then I learned later in life, you know, that being gay per se in that community is not about, you know, who you are. It's about just the feelings of sexuality. Right, that was it within the community, and I ended up pulling back, and I came out bi for this girl who I had been her gay best friend for about 2 years. I came out bi for her so that we could date. We dated for about a year, and then we broke up, and it was just complete confusion all the time, because we just never understood. Like, I never fully understood what I was going through. I came out pansexual, you know, which means all of a sudden you don't really care about the gender anymore. It's just about the personality, you know, or a good sexual chemistry. And that was all that was really important to me, was good sexual chemistry. You could have a good time, have a lot of fun, right? And that was just what was important. So I always knew it was super easy. And like a lot of people say, adult film industry, you picture like girls paying guys to watch them do things, right? And it's just not the case, right? A lot of the guy stuff in the adult film industry, or solo content, or even like duo content with like guys or girls, is watched by predominantly males, at least on my side, right? A lot of my viewers, I had probably like 20,000 viewers on my personal platform, and they were mostly dudes. You know, I sold my Snapchat, I sold my Twitter, I sold my Instagram. Well, Instagram not so much, but it was just like the people I really, really trusted, or the people close. But I had other platforms that I was able to sell for profit, and then they could hit me from different areas. Like, I want this custom content, I want this custom content, you know, and they could get anything they wanted above the moon as long as they had the money for it, you know. But the way I got into it was really, I moved down to California. I was kind of in the city of sin all of a sudden. I knew that I could get guys super easily. Like me walking into a bar, like a gay bar, I get free drinks all night. I knew what I had. I knew I could look okay to these guys, and I knew I was a skinny twink to these guys, and they were like, man, like they always wanted to be like, I was working at this bar down in California, and like guys would come up to you and corner you in corners where security had to pull them off of you because they just like they're so aggressive. Yeah, if you know how to use their aggression, you can use them, and you can grab them by their mind and take them anywhere you want. Right, so I learned how to do that. You know, these guys were so stupid to me. You know, I was like, you want me so bad physically, I just want you mentally, but I'll give you my physical to get you mentally. So once I had them wrapped around my finger, I could pull thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars out of these people, you know, because it was so easy, you know. And even till a couple months ago, I was able to go up to a guy at a bar, and I pulled $1,000 out of him, basically, just in one night after having met him. I saw what he had, I took it all. you know. And I told my buddy too, he was my roommate at the time. I was like, this guy right here, I'm gonna leave with a lot of his stuff tonight. But so I got to California, and I was like, had always thought about it. I was like, this would be really easy for me to do. I never really knew if I wanted to blast myself out there like that because of like family and friends and stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll do it. I had a contract with this Fab Scout Entertainment at one point, and they were able to write me a contract. After 30 days, the contract solidifies itself. You can't get out of it. You're owned at that point. So I ended up dating this girl at 28 days of the contract. I hadn't filmed yet with them. I emailed him. I said, hey, I can't do this, you know? So I jumped out of a contract that would have been like a 4-year contract where I would have been on all your major platforms. I would no longer have been able to hide myself anymore. It was very about to be public type of thing. There was no like VPN blockers, data blockers, or anything like that I could have put in place. I would have been on XXNX, Pornhub, you know, all that type of stuff. And there was no stopping it. So I got super blessed to be able to pull out of that. But after that relationship ended, it was really bad. I had come out pansexual. I realized I liked or was interested in what kind of like the trans woman, because there's a guy who likes girls and guys. You kind of have both at the same. And you know, that's how I saw it. You know, was, you know, you kind of get the best of both worlds if that's what you like. There's this girl in California. She was a super famous influencer down there, also super famous porn star. And I started collabing with her on her OnlyFans. And people started like hitting me hard with it, and they loved it, and people started reaching out to me. So I ended up starting an OnlyFans, a live cam account, and basically a bunch of different social media platforms that just took off. My first day on live cam, I made $7,000 in 5 hours. It was ridiculous. I still have pictures on my phone of this guy. Within like an hour and a half, he sent me $2,500 on Venmo. I made so much money on Venmo within the first like 6 months. They blocked my account and banned me from Venmo for life. I made like over $25,000 in a month on Venmo. And that was just on Venmo, but people would pay on the account, on the actual live cam platform, and they'd pay on the account. And after the payment max, like you could only pay me up to $1,000 like on there, you know, but some people really wanted to pay you more, you know, so they would like hit your Venmo, they would do your Cash Apps, they would do Apple Pay, you know, and it started getting kind of sloppy where if you give out too much information, you know, people can hit you up. So I'd have people hit me up and be like, hey, I'll fly you out to Miami if you'll spend a day with me. I'll give you like $4,000, pay for your travel, stuff like that, you know. Had a guy, he wanted me to come to Hilo in Hawaii. He's like, yeah, I'll give you $10,000 cash. He never came through, and I was very weary of doing like the traveling stuff. So I kind of just kept it local. But I mean, I definitely started seeing like, man, there's a lot of money in this. And I already thought nothing of myself anyway. So I was like, I'll make money with what I have, you know, and I would just meet random girls like on Bumble or whatever. I'd tell them what I did. And 9 times out of 10, they were like, wow, that's really cool. Can I do it with you? I said, I would always say, yeah, because they're going to make me more money, you know? And that was the thing, is like, I did it with girlfriends. I did it with, you know, guy friends. I did it with whoever, but it was never a relationship builder as much as like these girls are like, well, this is so fun. We can do this together. And I'm like, yeah, but you're a job to me now. You are now my job, you know, and I will tell you how to do your job because I am the owner of this platform, you know? So like, if you say something this way, that's not how I run my platform. I run a bubbly, high-end, get-to-know-you type of platform. And if you're going to talk about money, you're going to talk about things I don't want you to talk about, I'm going to mute it and tell you to shut the hell up. Like, stop. Like, go away. Because if you ruin my business, you know, I'll make sure to ruin you. The highest amount of followers I had was about 23,000 followers just on my live cam platform, a couple hundred on OnlyFans, and a couple thousand on some other platforms as well. In the time that I did, if I put all the money together from all the pictures and stuff, I probably made close to $100,000. But I only did it for like a year and a half, you know. It was still enough to kind of break you down. You know, it's a year and a half of you directing or you being directed. You know, I've done collaborations with people with full film sets like this. You know, I told Moses when we did his music video, I said, it was weird being on a couch with a microphone in front of like a lighting set, you know, except for this time I get to glorify God while being on a couch in front of a lighting set. You know, versus sitting here selling my body, you know, to you, you know. So I could have made a lot more money because at the end, I think it's probably about January somewhere in January, I forget the day of it, I figured out that you could make a ton of money escorting. I used to manage this girl, and I was basically, not pimp, but I managed her, and I would send her clients, right? High-end clients that I found, because I knew how to, again, grab their brain, pull them into whatever it was, and we would sell an experience, right? So we would take these guys like from Hawaii, Alaska, wherever they were from, who were traveling, they'd find us on an escort page, and they would hire us, right? So we could do anything role play, we could do anything you wanted. So I would send her on solos, and she'd pay me $200 for every 1,000 that they spent on her. So I could be completely hands off, and I think my best time was the guy spent like $7,000 on her, and I got a bunch of money from it, right? And I didn't even do anything. But she would always hit me up too and be like, hey, this guy wants an experience with like a guy and a girl, so we'd go to these hotels, and we would make like $1,000 in 1 hour. But that was just me, because she would make 1,000, I would make 1,000, and it was just super simple, because you're there. This guy is really, really nervous because he thinks you're probably cops the whole time. You walk into these hotels and you're just like, hey, you're what's getting paid for. They think they own you, but you own them the whole entire time, because even though they paid you, you have them wrapped around your finger the whole time, because you could walk out of the room. What are they gonna do? Call the cops? Good luck, So I was managing her for probably about 3 months, and I only did like 2 escorting shots. But it was one of those things where that was near the very, very end. That was like a couple weeks before I got to in my car accident, my last one. And I think had I not, my life would still be the same or close to. I'd still be escorted. So the drugs and alcohol were from basically 14 to 19, then I got sober from 19 to 25, and then adult film industry would have been starting in the it's hard to say, like 19, 20 to about 24. Because I always made money doing things no matter what, whether it was pictures, but like hardcore, like being in the adult film industry, like filming on sets type stuff like that was probably about 1.5 years. And then, so the car accident was when I was 19, I had the same car accident, almost exactly the same car accident in February of this year. And that's what changed my life basically. But, yeah, so there was 2 car accidents, basically deja vu car accident, same flashback, same stop sign.
Tell me about the second car accident.
Yeah, so basically the second car accident was on February 20th. I was at a bar and I had started drinking again. It was after a really, really gnarly breakup. A couple months I was starting to go into like deep depression. And I started driving down this road. I dropped this girl off at her house and I started driving back to my house. I don't really remember what happened because I had only drank like maybe 5 beers or something like that. I was just really blacked out at the steering wheel. And I just remember my foot just being heavy, me thinking the speed felt good. Like the G-force is kind of just ripping on your body. I had a Lexus IS 200, so it was fast. It was really nice. I had a good time in it. I had built it a bunch, so it was tuned up, And all of a sudden I remember blowing a stop sign. And I was like, oh, that's fine, right? I'm still good. And then all of a sudden another stop sign just whipped right past me and I crashed at 70 miles an hour into Finn Hill Middle School. By the grace of God, it was 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. in the morning and no one died and there was nobody there and there was no kids. I could have killed someone again. I crashed into a ditch at Finn Hill Middle School and completely totaled my car, ripped it to shreds. All the internals were just dripping, 100% airbag deployment. I walked out, not even a scrape, no concussion, nothing. The cops were looking at the car and they're like, man, that's really bad. That's like really, really bad. And I was like, yeah, they're like, you're lucky you're alive. And the paramedics are like, I don't know how you didn't die, but you're lucky you're alive, And I just kind of walked out. I was just like chipper as can be, I was like having a good time. I was still drunk. Again, as close as it was the last time, I would say probably a good 100 feet from my house. I live a block away from Finn Hill Middle School. But that radically changed my life. Had I not gotten that car accident, my life wouldn't be where it's at right now. I wouldn't have met God, met Jesus. Not that he wouldn't have, come to me eventually, but when I got in that car accident, the most impactful part of it was so deja vu. that it was the exact same instance, exact same time, basically, the exact same feelings, the exact same flash through my face right before I got into the car accident, that God basically told me, if this happens to you again and you don't choose me now, you will die. I will not save you again. There's too many times he saved me. It's too many times that he's really been like, hey, you need to wake up. I've not listened. But he made it very clear to me, like, if you don't choose me now, you're going to die. That's it. So I either knew at the end of that, after I had kind of processed, it's like, it's either I wake up and I see what this Jesus stuff is about, because it's either that happens or, basically I'm in jail for the rest of my life or I'm dead. And I was like, I don't have 9 lives. I had 6 so far. It's like, I'm not I'm a very unlucky person, but I've been very lucky, blessed in the way that I've been in like near-death situations. So it was kind of cool to see that. It was just insane. I had reached out to my dad after like a really bad breakup. It left me living in a hotel for a little bit. I had quit my job. I had left everything, moved to Wenatchee the day I got there. Basically, things didn't work out. I had already left my apartment, so I came back with my tail in between my legs, asking for my job back with no place to live. And I was just in this really like deep down depression area. I had never really felt true love before in my life, ever. And I kind of like opened my heart again to love somebody, and it just really hit me hard when it all just fell apart. When you go through a lot of stuff, you kind of start grasping. You grasp for something that could possibly help, and I just really wanted something to stick. I have my things in the past that are not good to grasp on, so I said to my dad, like, hey, maybe you could find me a men's group or something like that, and he goes, I'll look, and my parents have always been very encouraging, right? They're always like, where are you at with your life of God? When I told him that, hey, like, I don't know if it's right or wrong, so how am I supposed to know? He would ask that. My mom, whenever I'm on the phone with her, she'd be like, oh, is that an LGBTQ shirt? That's stupid. Like stuff like that, My mom was always very like, she'll keep to her morals, I'll keep to mine, but I'll fight you on mine. And that's the thing, is if you don't believe what I believe in, I'm going to fight you on it, because I'm a hard-headed guy, So they were always very encouraging at the time, but my dad really took that to heart, and so did my mom, when I said, hey, I want to find a men's group or something. I think it might help. It was a fleeting thought for me. It wasn't a thought where I was like, man, I really am going to do this. It was just kind of like a help. I don't even think it should have been me saying that. I don't even think that was me saying it, basically, but it came out of my mouth. And so my parents the next couple months really just looked at what it was to find a men's group. They looked at churches, they looked at places, they reached out to their friends over here and were like, we need to find a place. But by the time they had found anything, I was back into drugs again. I was drinking heavily. I started doing drugs again, had a couple like really close calls, in my room where should have passed again. And it was to the point where my dad finally reached out to me and he goes, hey, I found a men's group. And, it's actually this young adults group. It's in Seattle at this place called Pursuit. And I was like, cool. I'm not going. And he's like, yeah, and they also have a church service. You could make it. It's at 6 p.m. on Sunday nights. I was like, that's cool. I'm not going. But I didn't tell him that. I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll try to figure it out. I'm gonna go to that. So he texted me that young adults date. And I was like, oh man, I totally forgot that you sent that to me. I didn't go. And it was every other 2 weeks, So he texted me again the next time, and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna make it. I got called into work, I'm not gonna be able to go. I'm sorry. He goes, well, you could go to the church service. It's at this time. And I was like, well, I have to stay at work late. All these were lies. I was just sitting at home, just chilling, doing drugs and drinking. I was like, I'm not gonna go. So one day my dad texts me and he goes, hey, your mom and I are going to come and go to Pursuit if you'd like to join us on Sunday. And my parents live in Wenatchee, which is 2.5 hours away. So it's not like they were just coming here to go to Pursuit just for fun. They're very planted in their church, and it's very similar to Pursuit. So it's not something that they were coming over here to be like, yeah, let's just go. But they started watching the sermons probably for 4 months. They had been kind of just like vetting this church because they knew it was my last chance. And I think they knew somewhere deep down that, if we don't get him now or give him some hope now or find a good spot. Because my thing was, a lot of it was the church too. I always blamed it on the church. I blamed it on the people, on their walks with God, never with my own, because I never understood that. And so my parents come over to Seattle, and I was like, I don't want to go. So I almost texted him and said, hey, I'm not going to come with you guys. I have to do something. But I just went, and my parents picked me up from Medina, took me to Pursuit, and it just happened to be when Pastor Russ's wife was sharing on her testimony. And I was standing in the back there by the pillars, and I just remember hearing the words that were coming out of her mouth and out of Russ's mouth, and I just remember sitting there, and just tears started coming down my eyes. And I never really understood why I was feeling what I was, but I just knew that I had to get out of that room. So I went downstairs. I was still smoking at the time, and I was like, man, I really don't understand what's happening. I walked outside, and I got locked out. I couldn't get back in. And so I almost didn't wave anybody down, but I knew the feeling that was drawing me back inside. I had to go back in. So I was like some weird dude with a backpack outside, like, hey, can you let me in during the church service? And some guy, he let me in. I don't even remember who it was. And I went back upstairs, and I was just in tears, and I just couldn't understand. It was good worship music. It made sense. The guy on stage didn't look like some square that I was used to, at other places that I had envisioned in my brain, and I was like, man, maybe there is something to this. And I just remember at the end, Russ said, if you want to be prayed for, if you feel like you need to be prayed for, come up to the stand or to the altar right now. And I said, okay. So my legs just started walking. For some reason, I knew I needed to go up there. And something in me told me to have Russ pray with me. So I tried getting Russ's attention. Russ came down. He prayed for me on the stage, and I was just in tears crying. My dad was behind crying. He went downstairs, and he was in tears. I know my mom was just sitting there super happy. And then we left afterwards. And it was really strange because we left, and my mom was just chatting about it in the car, and my dad was talking about it in the car. They were both super happy. I was feeling all these feelings that I've never felt before. I didn't really know what was happening, but quickly it went away. So my instant reaction, halfway through the drive was like, shut up, please. Can you guys stop talking to me about this? It's over, it's done. I'm going to go home, have a couple drinks. It's whatever. Just, you're overdoing it. That was my thing, was you guys are overdoing it. It's not that big of a deal. And we get to the parking lot in Medina, and this will never leave me because it was just so powerful. My mom looks at me and she goes, because of what you felt tonight, the devil is coming for you. The hunt has begun. And I looked at her and I was like, cool, see you later, right? And I got in my car and I drove home. Didn't know what it meant, but they were serious about it when they said it, and they were just very much pointing to the fact that God's coming for you, but Satan will fight back. And my parents have always told me, you will be able to do something greater in your life. You're going to be able to do something greater than your life than what you're doing now. What you're doing now is not who you are. It never is going to be the extent of who you could be. Because I was living a life of sin, in the restaurant industry, kind of just doing my own thing at whatever pace without God, and, that could be said for anybody. You're not going to be living your full extent if you do that exact same thing. And so that part really stuck with me because of the fact that they said the devil is coming for you. It wasn't 2 weeks later, a week and a half later, I got in that car accident. And that's when I heard God tell me, I flew past the stop sign. In my first car accident, the last thing I remember is a stop sign just blowing past me and then hitting impact. Second car accident, the last thing I remember is a stop sign blowing past my eyes, and then I hit impact. I got out of the car just absolutely crying. I called my dad and was like, I did it again. I was like, I did it again. I am the son who just keeps messing up and disappointing his parents. I was like, I don't understand why I keep doing it. I was like, I don't understand what's happening with me. But I was like something like I'm broken. I was like, I am depressed. I was like, basically told my dad, I just don't understand. And my dad, it's 12 a.m. in the morning or 1 a.m. in the morning. And my dad's just like, yep, what's up? Where are you at? And so I told him, I was like, I'm going to jail tonight. I'll call you tomorrow. He's like, oh no, you're not going to jail. He's like, just go home. I'm like, Dad, I don't think you understand how this works. You can't just go home. Bless his soul, he didn't have to, have that type of stuff around, and he never had to go to jail and stuff like that. But I knew, I was like, I'm probably gonna go back to school. I'm going to jail tonight. I've been through this before. And so the cops showed up, they booked me, they arrested me, they took me to jail. Funny story, actually, they put me in the cop car like this, as they do, right? They sat me down, and then on video, I have footage of this. They open the door, and I'm like this in the cop car, and the lady just stops, and she goes, "You're not supposed to do that." And, or she goes, "How'd you do that?" And I was like, well, it was just uncomfortable, so I moved them forward. And she's like, "How?" And I was like, well, I just stepped through them, but while sitting down. And the guy goes, "Wow, that's really impressive." The cop guy, and he goes, "That's just not in our, not really in our handbook." And I was like, I didn't read the handbook, so I just got arrested. So I thought it was super funny, but I had video footage of that. And I got out, and I was hanging out with my parents, and we were watching a Pursuit thing online because we had a vacation to Hawaii 3 days later. And so I just get booked, I go to jail, and then all of a sudden I'm in Hawaii. Right? It was really traumatic for me because I was just sitting in Hawaii depressed. I have nothing. I was like, I have all this debt. I owed, what was it, $20K on my car, and my gap claim was going to get denied because it was a DUI arrest, right? So I was about to owe $20,000 on my car that I had no idea how I was about to pay for. I was about to have lawyer fees, DUI fees, scram device fees, all these things that I was like, I'm going to owe $50,000 all of a sudden in one day, and now I have no car. Now I don't know how to get to work. I was in jail for a day, so I'm lucky my job even let me stay, because all of a sudden I no call, no showed for a day. So it was just a bunch of things all at once that I'm in Hawaii wow, this is not great, And so I was watching Pursuit with my parents on the couch, and I hadn't really processed everything yet about, where God had clearly told me everything. It took a couple days to actually process those words, or that feeling of, the Holy Spirit just telling me hey, this is what's up. And we watched it, and I was like, hey, why do you guys watch the music? That's so lame. You just watch the pastor's sermon. They're like, well, we like the music. I'm like, well, why? And so it was funny because then the next day, or when I got back on, I think, a Wednesday, and on Thursday, I watched one of the ones that Russ had done on YouTube, and I sat down in my room, I opened all the blinds and curtains, and I just kind of watched it. And from watching it, I was just sitting there, and he said something about Romans. It was Romans chapter 6. I can't quote it per se to verse, but basically that whole entire chapter that he read, I was like, man, that's my life. I was like, that's real messed up. And I was like, that's my life. And I was just sitting there alone in my room just crying. And I was like, this is insane. I should probably go to church. Russ is the man. Russ is the savior of all, blah, 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 blah. And that was just my thought process at the time, And so I went to church on Sunday, that coming Sunday, and I walked in, and I met a couple people. I was just kind of that weird dude again in the corner with a backpack. I don't know anybody. I hope they don't think I'm going to kill anybody because I have a backpack. And it was full of stuff because I had all my stuff in there. I had clothes from earlier, all my work stuff. So it's it's a big backpack. People are probably like, what is in that backpack? And then I bring it up into the sanctuary, and I still have the backpack, so it's a little scary. But I remember Mark telling me, he sat down with me, and Mark, the gentleman I was talking about, he sat down with me, or was talking to me. He's like, yeah, this guy tonight is preaching. And I was like, well, Russ, yeah? And he's like, no, his name's Daniel Brown. And I was like, oh, crap. And so I actually almost left. I almost went home because my dad had actually texted me and told me, he goes, I'm going to pay for your Uber to Pursuit tonight because after you feel something so strong, you should go. You need to make sure you get into a church. So he Ubered me that night to Pursuit from my job, and I was about to just take the bus home because I didn't want to stay. And we go up to the sanctuary, we do the singing, and I remember during the singing sitting there in my dress shirt, in my work clothes, and I was sitting there trying to figure out how to stand without looking weird, and I looked around, and people were just lifted hands up, praising God, and I was here just sitting there worried about how I looked. And I was looking at them, and I was that guy who was staring at you while you're praying and stuff. And like no one cared. They looked all so at peace. I wasn't. I was never someone who sung in church or did anything like that. I was just very like, nope, I'm just pulled back, reserved. I'll sing on the dance floor. I'll bust a move. But, I'm not doing that in church. No way, you're crazy. I saw people jumping up and down at the stage, and, like, it was very strange to me. And I remember sitting down and just kind of opening my ears, and at the same time having originally planned on closing them, and you got up on stage, and basically what you had said, the first thing was crazy to me, because you said, I don't remember exactly the context of how you said it, but I remember you said, some of you are here for the person who's speaking and not here for the word of God. And that really hit me hard, because I was like, man, that's me. I was like, that is me. That's me. Yep. And I had almost left for that fact. So I ended up kind of just like opening my ears, chilling that night, and just really like diving into what you had to say. And after, I just didn't really care, who was around me anymore. We went back into praise. People said, hey, come up, and pray if you need, any prayer tonight. And I just remember the song Holy Forever came on. And it just completely internally ripped me apart. I had my hands up in the air. I was just singing and just crying. Like, I couldn't stop crying. I wasn't trying to not cry, and I wasn't trying to cry. It wasn't a theatrical move for me. It wasn't something where I'm like, I'm going to get something out of this. It was literally just my heart tearing itself apart in 1,000 directions. And I knew that I had to be there, because the Holy Spirit came to me that night and walked my little legs up again to the front and prayed with one of the people on prayer group. I said, hey, and he goes, what do you want to pray about tonight? And I was like, I want to ask God into my life. I was like, I feel it, and this is what I need right now, and forever. And so he prayed for me, and then walked me over to you. Actually, you were sitting there, and he was like, hey, there's someone I want you to meet, and he started walking me over to you, and some guys like on our way stopped me. He goes, hey. He's like, I need to say something to you. He goes, you are going to be an evangelist for God. God wants me to know that you're going to share your story and people are going to be saved. And I was like, well, that's crazy. I don't know what that means. See ya. I walked past him and started talking to you. And it was crazy, because you had told me things, like you walked from God, and turned your back completely on him between the 9th and 10th grade, which was very true. I had always that remnants of it, but I think about that time was when I was never really saved. I never had a relationship with God growing up, but that was exactly the time that if any distance of that was in my brain, that's when it turned. You prayed for me, and another thing that you said to me that was really impactful was, God, I want you to know that God forgives you, but you need to forgive yourself too. Because that was something I didn't know how to do. I was not sure if I could forgive myself for the things I've done, because regardless of the things I've been through, there's a lot of people I've hurt and not cared about, especially in the adult film industry, especially within certain things in my life, drugs, alcohol. Like, with those things come a stigma, and a lot of that stigma fell on me, right? I didn't care about people. I didn't care about your feelings. I didn't care how I ripped you off. I didn't care how I took your money. Like, it was like an evil soul that I had in me, So feeling like, hey, like God's talking to me, but at the same time, like, I can't forgive myself for what I've done or for who I've sold myself to. Especially, I had escorted a week before that, or maybe 2 weeks before that, so I was truly still very broken inside. I still had very low self-hope for myself, anything. And I sat on that the next day, and the next day I was waiting on my insurance adjuster to get back to me, for my car, and basically tell me like, hey, we're only going to pay you out $6,500 for your car, and you still owe $20. You're going to have all this debt. They came back, they adjusted my car at the wrong price. They gave me back $19,100 off of about $6,000 I should have gotten back. And that's when I saw my first miracle, and I was like, wow, holy smokes, man. I was like, God is good. And that was the funny thing, is like, usually I'd be like, wow, that's so lucky. But the way I saw it was like, man, God bless me. God gave me his first miracle, because there's no way that should happen in the insurance industry. Stuff like that doesn't happen. They don't accidentally pay you out like $11,000 or $12,000, $13,000 more than you should have been paid. So it was really huge for me that night, or that day. And then the next day I went to young adults in pursuit. And that was the night where they had the girls do like the singing, and then the guys did the singing, and you guys were all on stage like lifting that voice up. And I remember sitting in that room just like, people were like, get leveled by God, bring the Holy Spirit into the room, just Jesus, join us here. And I feel like wind like coming around the room, and it was like hitting my skin, feeling like it was kind of like ripping it in places. Like you had like a bunch of paper cuts. It was like kind of like ripping your skin open. And it was just so powerful to me that I felt like I was shooting heroin into my arm or taking like major doses of Molly and just coming up, without doing any drugs. I felt high, and it was insane, because after that as well, I didn't know how to react. Like it was all over, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, have a good night. And I'm like, what's happening? So I go back and I sit in the middle of Pursuit, like in the main auditorium. I'm just sitting there, like kind of just in a chair, just like looking at the YA. I'm just staring there. I'm just crying, just like full on crying. I can't control anything. My body's just like shaking. And I'm not really like seeing anyone around me, but all of a sudden I feel like a hand on my shoulder, and it was Moses. Moses was there, and he started praying for me, and all of a sudden Christian was sitting right next to me, and these people are just like praying for me, and all of a sudden there's a tissue in my hand, and people are just like being really kind, and something I wasn't used to, like in my world I had no friends, because if you had friends they could burn you. They could try to use you, and I wasn't willing to be used. I was willing to use, but I wouldn't be the receiver of that. And no one truly cared if you were hurting. Everyone was hurting in my industry. Everyone pretty messed up, something to joke about. Right? But it was weird, because Moses was like, hey, let's go grab coffee on Friday. And then this other guy, Christian, I had been talking to him a bunch, and we had connected because I came in, I had rode my bike to YA 14 miles there, 14 miles back, just to get there that first night. And I did that for a couple weeks. I would do like 40-mile days on my bike just to make sure to get to Seattle and to Pursuit and to home. And it was just, I had to be there. So I had to do it. And it wasn't like I actually even had to do it. I wanted to do it. And people were like, wow, 14 miles. I'm like, it's not bad. Like, I want to be there, so I'll get there, But I just started meeting all these people and connecting with all these people. And I think I even told, I don't remember who it was, but I basically told some of my friends, I was like, I didn't choose you guys. I didn't want you guys. And like, I know it sucks to hear as friends, but like, honestly, I did not want you at all. God put you in my life, and I said yes, and I followed, and I'm so glad that you guys are here in my life, because you guys are a huge part of the stepping stone into the area I am now. But had you come to me at any other point in my life and been like, hey dude, let's be friends, I would have been like, get out of here, you're crazy, you're a Jesus freak, Bible thumper, no way. And that's just honestly the way it would have been, because I just wasn't about it. I was so hard-headed. But the last crazy thing that I think I experienced, the night I got saved, was I had been living this giant false identity of who I really truly was. I didn't understand how to get out of it, and I couldn't have gotten out of it. I get in fights over, like, with people about, my morals versus their morals. And the night I got saved, I went home and I texted a friend who's been texting me about something that they were concerned about for themselves. They're leaving, someone who's really truly loved to them, who's also a female, and she's a female. And she'd always text me like, hey, like, do you think what I'm doing is right by leaving this girl for God? And I would be telling her like, no, dude, like, you should love who you love. Just be who you would want to be with, because if God was a God, he wouldn't make people who loved each other like that. Taking the free will part out of it, I didn't know about all that stuff yet. So anyways, I texted her that night and I was like, God's completely changed me. I believe what we've done is wrong. And I believe this industry of the LGBTQ is just not something that I ever truly believed in, but it's an identity that I followed for, validation for myself. So that it was crazy to me too, because I don't even know how to explain it to you how like pro LGBTQ I was. I threw away half my clothes the next day because they were all pride clothes, right? Like half of my stuff was just gone, and I was like, wow, that's crazy how much I actually had, because it was just gone. And I just haven't looked back since, and it's just been one thing after another since I've been saved. That next week someone came up and prayed for me and said, you're going to be an evangelist and a prophet of God. after that person, that night I got saved, said that, and I was like, well, this is kind of becoming like redundant now. And so I was like thinking about it. I started sharing my story, and 2 people told me this within a course of a week. Be careful who you share your story with. And I didn't actually get the last of what they said, because I stopped them. I said, don't care what people think about me. Don't care if people don't like me. Don't care if people think I'm too much. Because yes, I am an out there, off the wall type of person. I'm aware of this. Also, don't care because they didn't have to live through it. And I've been saved by God. He's transformed me into somebody that's worth telling a story. I was like, if you can't handle, the darkness of a past, I don't need you in my life. If you can't handle how exciting and amazing a story could be with God's transformations and his hand behind the whole entire thing, I don't need you in my life either. So I kind of would stop people there, but it got to the point where someone came up to me and prayed at a YA, and they said, God wants you to know that you're not supposed to hide your story. He goes, God wants you to share your story with everyone who will listen. And I had started to pull back a little bit on sharing my story as much, and feeling like, man, should I be telling everyone my story? But I always felt like it was something. God had always kind of directed me since the crash. Like, your story could be used as something to help people. And I was corrected at one point. It's not my story, it's his story. It's his story of transformation that I got to live, and I'm blessed to live the versatility of the story that I have, because without it, my voice, I feel like, would be a little bit smaller, So that after that happened, he came and prayed for me, and I was sitting there like, man, I really should share this story. That next week, I was supposed to go to Pursuit in Seattle, the PM service, and my buddy was like, hey, come to this other place. And I hadn't been to any other church, any other really event, since I had been saved. So I was like, no, I can't cheat on Pursuit, and I got kind of almost peer pressured into going, and then it's like, okay, I'll go. So I went. And at that service, they said, there's a couple people in this room who have testimonies that need to be shared tonight. If you are one of those people, come up to the front. And I felt God speak to me right there, and I said, okay, go. So I walked up there again, and there was 2 of us, a guy who had addiction problems, and I went up there as well, and we told about 1 minute of our story. And from that night on, I said, that's kind of when I reached out to some friends, was like, hey, I think this story needs to be told. I feel like there's things that I could say from my past that could really, really help somebody and help them realize that God is here. God is alive. God's not dead. God will forever be here for you, no matter who you are, where you've been, and what path of life you've walked in. No matter what, there is hope for all people. I felt like there was no hope for me, and it wasn't until that night at YA that I finally was able to forgive myself. I've talked to a bunch of friends all the time. I'm very open with the stuff I go through. I'm very open with the stuff I struggle with now, because I know if I keep it in, if I keep it to myself, it's going to kill me inside. There's things that I've struggled with, like porn addictions, and just like sex addictions and stuff like that I still do struggle with, but I still continue to pull on them, I was so blessed to have the cravings for alcohol and drugs completely taken away that night at YA when they prayed over us at night for release of addictions. That was completely amazing. I just kind of felt it slip away. The next day, I was taking a shower, I was about to get in the shower, and I was hitting my vape. I've been smoking for 10 years. I smoked a pack and a half a day to 2 packs a day for about 7 years, went to vape and started smoking the vape for 3 years. And it's nothing I could have ever stopped. I've thought about it, even when I was sober for 6 years, man, there was no way I could get off of it. I told myself, I'll quit after a year because it's not good to quit everything at once, send you in a crazy spiral and everything like that. But I never did. It was just my last vice of everything that I had. And I was standing in front of my sink, and I was like, man, and I don't know what came across my head, but all of a sudden, something told me, turn your sink on and put your vape under. I was like, no. So I took one big last hit of my vape, I blew it out, and I was like, okay, put it under, until I literally saw it, and I held it, and I watched it blink, just completely dead, and just turn off. I threw it away, never touched it again. It's been almost 2 months. right? And it was hard for about 2 weeks, but it was one of those things where I knew it was holding me back. I knew a lot of these things, there was so much I had to change, like in my experience, someone says like, I have a porn addiction. I got saved by God. I stopped watching porn, and then hallelujah. Then I had to battle the little demons. I was like, I had to stop making money. I had to stop doing this. I had to stop doing this. I was like, my whole entire life that I'm living is like everything that I've seen people come in with and be like, I'm battling this, but I got rid of it. I'm like, I got like 40 things I got to drop all at once. Like, I'm going to go crazy, So it was kind of hard to just think about dropping it all at once. But, I also realized too, it's all worth it, no matter what pain I was living in. My thing is God continued to strip me back and has continued to strip me back financially through basically anything and everything. I lived with no money. I still have no money, completely paying off a bunch of stuff from like debt to car crash to anything that I was in. I was at one point living with like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in my bank account in a nice apartment in downtown Bellevue with a good job to living in a basement of a house, $35,000 to $60,000 in debt. And just completely stripped back from everything. No girlfriend, no life, no car, riding a bike and taking the bus to work, struggling at work because I was just not as focused, going to church, stopping drinking, stopping drugs, stopping this, like not being able to buy food for myself because I broke to buy any. I felt like I was getting peeled back. And it wasn't until a couple weeks ago when I called my parents on the phone, I was just crying and I was like, it's not stopping. I was like, I am being peeled back so far that I do not understand how I could possibly go forward. And the one thing I've held on to is something that you said was sometimes God uses you like a bow and arrow in order to be projectiled in a fast momentum towards the target. You have to get pulled back to extreme extents, right? Because in order to propel with momentum, you have to have some driving force behind it. So I still feel like I'm getting pulled back and stripped back every day, and my story is definitely not finished, and there's going to continue to be growth and stuff like that. But, every day I've just been trusting God, reading the Bible, reading the Word and diving in and trying to understand what it is, that my purpose is. But, as of now, I've just continued on the path that God has kind of directed, of sharing other people's testimonies, and we're kicking off something now where we're starting a testimony series where we're taking people who have, horrible, crazy backgrounds, to show people that no matter who you were, you can still glorify God, and then actually your story can show the true testimony of how God can put his hand on anything and change. Because, we're going to have people from like witches to like ex-drug addicts to people in prison. And I told my friend the other day, I said, my goal is to be sitting within a year next to somebody who murdered somebody and found Jesus. Wow. Right? And talk to them about their story, because we want to show the impact of Jesus. And I know how stubborn I was at the end of the day. I know how messed up I was at the end of the day. But to even think that God was able to touch me and change me blows my mind. I don't even think it's possible, yet it happened to me. So it still blows my mind every day that he still trusted me with anything. In my past, it's crazy actually. When I was a kid, I was probably 9 when this happened, but I got in some pretty big trouble with my parents. They found a ton of drugs in my room. I got in pretty big trouble just as a whole. And my parents said, hey, we understand that you're going through a lot of stuff, but, what can we do to help? And I basically told him, I said, there's really nothing you can do to help me. I'm feeling pretty lost, and I'm not willing to change because this is who I am, basically, as a kid, 16-year-old kid, or not even 16-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, or whatever it is. This is who I am. I'm trying to think. No, I wasn't 9. How old was I? I'd have been like 14. Because I would have been, I'd have been 14. So I was 14 doing all these drugs, and they caught me, and I used it as baptism. I said, you know what, Mom and Dad, I'm going to get baptized because I knew it was going to get me out of trouble. Right, so I went in there, got baptized, felt no emotion, just water, and then I left. And it was just one of those like routine baptisms where the church was doing it, so you just kind of jumped in. And it got me out of trouble immediately. Like I literally didn't even get grounded. Nothing bad happened to me. And I used it as a lifesaver, basically. And that was another thing that I felt really guilty about for a long time. But I figured once I got saved this time, I was like, I should consider getting baptized, and people would always tell me like, hey, you should get baptized in the Holy Spirit. And honestly, I didn't really know the difference for a long time. I thought that when you get baptized in the Holy Spirit for quite a while. I didn't realize they were two separate things. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So I thought about it and was like, it would be cool to have that public, kind of throw out there of like, hey man, like I've been radically changed by Jesus. He's like irrational, radical changes in my life. That nobody can explain. I can't even understand. So let's get up there. Let's tell my story and proclaim that I am with Jesus now. And it was huge because not just for my family, I wanted people to know. I wasn't afraid to post it on social media. I lost a couple hundred followers in the first couple weeks after I started posting stuff about Jesus because people are like, who is this guy? I had one of my friends who messaged me as well that I thought it was really funny too. So basically, my friend messaged me right after he saw a bunch of the stuff on my Instagram account and stuff with Jesus, and he's the guy I used to run with. I never really did a bunch of drugs with him or anything like that, but he knew who I was. He knew I was in the industry. He knew I made a lot of money doing it, and I was kind of that friend who would be like, oh, let's hang out. And if I liked them, I'd be like, yeah, sure. Here's well, I'll pay for things and do things, and kind of a friendship where I didn't care how much money I spent on people, but he saw how lost I was, and I never actually realized this guy was a Christian. He was one of my good friends for a long time. I never knew he was a Christian. And he messaged me back on one of my Instagram posts, and he says, I'm glad to see you found the meaning of life, man. I've prayed for you before, and God always answers prayers. You're proof. I didn't believe it could happen. I just didn't see you turning direction, man, but I was wrong and got to have more faith. I love you as a brother in Christ and a friend. Hope all is well and things get easier for the both of us. Just got to have faith. And it was crazy to me to hear one of my friends just tell me basically I thought you were so far gone you couldn't get saved. Something that always stuck with me too is my mom. My sister would used to tell my mom, because my sister knew a lot about everything I did. I always told her, please don't tell my mom, or mom, because it's just going to hurt, and there's no reason for them to know. And my sister used to tell my mom, I found this after I got saved, my sister would say, Mom, if you only knew what Blake was going through or what Blake was doing. And my mom would tell my sister, I don't want to know what he's going through, even if you're willing to tell me, because I have to keep my hope in Jesus, in God, that he could still have work in Blake's life. And I fear that if I know what he's doing or has done, I will lose that hope. Right? Which was crazy to me. On my birthday, actually, this year, my parents came up to come to Pursuit again. Did you meet them when they came up? Yeah. That was that night that they came up for my birthday, and my sister had sent something with them, and it was a Bible. My sister sent a Bible up with them. My mom said, this is from your sister and from the family, and it was this military Bible. And I was like, okay, I have a Bible already. My dad sent me a really cool one, a study Bible. So I was like, I don't know why I need this little Bible, but cool. And my mom's like, look in the back of it. And so I opened it up, and it was dated 2022, which is from when I had cancer. It's when I found out I had cancer in my appendix. My sister had gotten a Bible and taken it to my parents and said, I want to do this. I want to write a bunch of encouraging notes in here, and I want to be able to give this to Blake the day he gets saved, because it will happen. And God is going to change his life, but I want to have something to be able to give to him when it happens. So I have my nieces, my nephews, who were all young. I have my mom, my dad, my sister, her husband, all wrote notes in this back of this Bible for me. And I was able to open it up and see it. It looked old. It was dated a couple years ago, and they gave it to me. And my mom said, your sister always knew you'd find Jesus and he would find you. But it was just so crazy. It was such an emotional moment for me, because just, thinking to that encouragement, they had been thinking about me and my walk with God the whole entire time. My mom would always tell me, no matter what I went through, this is Jesus in your life. And I'm like, sure, okay, it is, and now it truly is, through things that I've overcome, couldn't have been through myself. It was with the help of God and the walk of life that I was living, that he just had his hand on it the whole time and said, something that you're going to do is greater than this. But at some point, again, he does give you the option, I can only give you so many chances. You will choose to die at one point, and it's not my choice for you to die, but if you make this mistake again, you probably will. So that was really cool to just see. And my sister ended up coming up to see my baptism. My whole entire family drove up, 6-hour round trip again in one day, just to see the baptism, and they were there, and my sister was just crying, and my niece wrote me a letter that I still have. She's 6. She wrote me a bunch of letters while I was there, and she wrote me one, she handed it to me, and she goes, "It's a pleasure to see you baptized." And it was super cute, just because she just handed it to me, and she goes, "This is for you." And my niece at the very end of it comes down, and she's just bawling, crying, and she's also, I think she's 6 too, and she goes, "I don't want to leave, Jesus is here." And she just felt the Holy Spirit in the room, because a week prior to that baptism, I had been praying, and my sister had asked me to pray for her. My sister has some social anxiety and stuff that she'll hopefully share in the future, and she's got a lot of hurt in her life too. She has almost as crazy of a story as I do, She has a very crazy story, and it's very dark and deep, but I felt God tell me that you need to pray for her, and praying for her just, from here to Wenatchee wasn't going to be enough, and she's not one to speak out in front of a bunch of people, so I just suddenly felt the Holy Spirit enter me after my baptism, right when we started going into prayer, and they were calling people up to the front again to pray, and I just started sobbing again, and I couldn't control it. I was just pouring tears out of my eyes. I couldn't stop it. And I just prayed to God, tell me what to say, help me pray for my sister. What is it that I'm supposed to do? And as soon as this music started going, I grabbed my sister's hand. I said, "Come with me." Didn't give her an option, pulled her up to the stage, and you were actually standing there. I think you kind of saw a little bit of it. But I'm hysterically shaking, crying. My sister is shaking, crying. And I just grabbed her back by the back of the head, and I started praying for her and asked God to release her of all these things. And it was just crazy, because ever since then, God's talked to me a couple times, and basically highlighted things I'm supposed to do, or highlighted people I'm supposed to pray for, and I've just gone for it. Who am I to say no? And there's obviously going to be times where I don't notice or am too afraid to do it, but as of now, I've taken 100% opportunities that I've been presented with, and nothing but good things have happened, and it's been 100% successful for not my soul, but theirs as well. And I can tell you from living testimony of what my sister's been through from that day on, it's presented radical change in her life, and things have progressed to the point where now she is seeing people to get help that she needs. And she told me the other day, she goes, "I don't know how my brother became so wise and has now become a role model that I look up to, and I was talking to her on the phone that night too, and said 2 more things that I had learned the night before, where my sister said, "I needed to hear that today." That is something that has been going on in my heart right now, that God has been pulling me apart on, and that is exactly what I needed to hear. Yeah. Basically what happened was I really, really had it on my heart to do some type of thing where we can film. And I think in the beginning it started to the fact of I really wanted to get my testimony out into the open. I really wanted to share it with the world and give some type of hope, and I can never ever on a testimony video, like you said, I could never share all the stories I truly have of where God's worked in my life, or even all the pain and suffering that I've been through. It's impossible. I could sit down with somebody for hours and just, talk to anybody about anything. The other day, someone was talking to me about how they were sad that their son, wasn't really at home or had run away and stuff like that, and I was able to go up to them and share with them my side about the adopted part of how I treated my parents and why I treated him the way I did, and that it wasn't his fault. It was actually something he needed to process as a child, so things like that. I really wanted to be able to, and I still want to continue to be able to go out and help people and understand where it is that they came from, who it is that they are, maybe find their identity, or find their just journey with God, and through words, I believe that God can, transform things that, were meant for such pain and suffering into things that are just going to give him complete glory. I had a vision, and I don't know what it was and exactly why it started off this way, but the night that there was a music video filmed, remember that one? Yeah, so we did the music video, and we were standing outside, and I had just briefly mentioned it to Christian because they talked about doing the music video, and I was like, man, would you ever, be willing to, film my testimony? He's like, yeah, man. And I had only met him like 2 or 3 times at that point, so I wasn't really sure if like that was something. He's like, yeah, man, or just like I'll say yeah for now, but push him off later type of thing. So I wasn't really sure what was happening with that, and it kind of just stuck in my head and just kept rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. And I thought to myself, I was like, I'm meeting all these people, and I'm meeting a lot of people who I feel like are like very engaged by the testimony, and it's helped a lot of people already, just hear what I've had to say, and it seems very normal to me, because as me, I've lived it. It seems like what else would life be like? This is all I know. And so the thought kind of really stuck with me, and it was the story of where I told you where the guys had prayed over me. This was all after the idea, and the people were like, you're going to need to share your story. Don't hide your story, and God wants you to share your story. And that's kind of where I was like, man, it really seems like this is what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know. So I went to this Bible study one night, and I talked to the guy speaking, and I was like, man, I just really feel like this is on my heart. I just want to make sure I'm doing this for the right reasons. I don't really know if this is what I'm supposed to do, but I feel like God is really nudging me into the direction of this. Because at first I thought I needed to be like, go into like pastor stuff or whatever. I was like, that's just not really where my heart's at, but I was like, I feel like I need to share. Like something that I'm supposed to be sharing is what's on my heart. So as it kind of collected itself into a vision, I started praying a bunch for it. I said, God, like if this is what you want me to do, let it grow heavy on my heart. If this is not what you want me to do, pull it from my heart. And it started to get to the point where it became a sick obsession. Right? And I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like all I could think about at work, and it's still a lot of what I think about today. But when I was at this youth group meeting, the guy told me, he goes, sometimes God provides green lights. He goes, but you can miss them. If you don't actually go for that green light, sometimes you're not going to get it, So here's the thing. He's like, God will provide the way for you. And if it's not the way you're supposed to go and you're actually truly listening, he will throw up a red light. If you adjust with the curve of that red light, then you'll be okay. He goes, just listen to God. And so then I listened to what he had to say that night, and he had more stuff along basically that whole premise of what he said. And I went home, I texted Christian this long thing, and I was like, basically like, hey, if this is something you're willing to do, I would like to actually like get this into gear and kick it out, and get it started. This is kind of what I want to do. This is why. And I just prayed. I was like, God, if like this is not something that should be happening, let things just get thrown up. And every time I've tried to take it into my own hands, it gets shot down, Like I truly believe you're supposed to be here with me today talking about the testimony because you were there the night I got saved, and you were the guy who I prayed with and, just encouraged me a bunch throughout this journey as well. It's been really great to have you. But anytime I've tried to take it like, this person needs to do this or this person needs to do this, like I wanted to start it sooner, but then wasn't able to because of certain things and not having all the testimonies possible, or like, man, where's this next testimony going to come from? And then kind of one just pops up out of the blue, and everything's falling into place, to the point where it's going to glorify God no matter what. And I told my friends the other day, it's like, no matter how many views it gets, whether it gets 1 to 1,000 or whatever, I was like, all it takes is one person to see that and to feel some type of way. And that's the goal, is just to get it out there to help people understand that testimonies do help and can set you free. And if not helping other people who view it, the way I see it now is it's going to help the person telling it. Because I'm going to be able to get people into a room to sit in front of a camera and a microphone who have never told their testimony before, who have said, you know what, I finally feel comfortable enough to tell my testimony that Jesus had me transform through, and they're going to be able to just lay it all on the table like they really, really, really want it, right? And they're just going to say it with passion, and they're going to feel it through their body because it's going to be the first time. And it's going to set them free. So regardless if someone sees it, it sets them free, it sets them free. And it's going to help them increase their journey with God, So that's the goal, is whether it helps this party or this party, it's kind of just like doing it is going to just glorify God no matter what. So that's been what's on my heart since, I've been saved, is just really telling my testimony, and there's so many, again, different parts of my testimony that I could tell you that you could expand on, but I truly believe God will give me those opportunities in the future to, go places and speak, about the testimony of it somewhere, whether it's on a stage, a small group, at a church, or wherever, as long as I can continue to tell it and refine it and, tell the truth and show the redemption that God has given me, that's glorifying God. I think if you have a dark story or a past that you're afraid of, and I think if you have a past that might have eaten at your mental or have eaten at who you think you are, maybe you've stumbled over a bunch of things and you feel like you can't get up, I truly believe that getting your testimony out there and telling other people is going to set you free, not only by the words of your encouragement, by the words of their encouragement that they're going to come back at you with, but it's also going to help everyone in the inner circles and outer circles really see that no matter how far down you go, God can reach down into that pit and pull you up, but not just pull you up by a rope, but he can pull you up by pure strength and brutal force, because up to you and to anybody who's going through things, whether you're depressed or you're in an alcoholism or whether it is, you have no strength. But with God, you have all strength, because he is the only one who can take you out of the depths of hell. So yeah, basically I had this vision of, once God told me, like, hey, you need to share your story. You need to go out and, share what you've been through and what I've, had my hand on this whole entire time, that there should be 5 men that you need to tell your story to. And in my head, the whole entire time, I was thinking, this needs to happen before. This needs to happen, before the shoot. And I actually called my dad 2 weeks ago because I thought we were filming on Tuesday, and I said, hey, just by chance, do you think you could get 5 men that you trust into a phone call, and we could all talk and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, I could try. It's really short notice, because I had forgotten about it. And I was like feeling I hadn't done my due diligence of getting it all done and stuff. And I had slacked on it again this week, and I actually thought about it on the way down here today. Man, I really didn't get those 5 men to talk to. I didn't really have, that vision that I was like, am I missing a piece? But now that I'm here in the room today, there are 5 men surrounding me right now that I'm telling my story to, and it's crazy. It's full circle rawness of God, because regardless of the vision that I thought I saw, it was not the vision that he actually had for me. It blows my mind. It blows my mind. That vision of the testimony just like coming together with me being a part of it, some of it, and the rest of it just slapping me across the face saying, here's the rest. I didn't have my hand in most of it. I gave it up to the creative team. I said, do what you will. I will bring the testimony. And the thing that I was also supposed to bring that I didn't bring kind of just brought itself. Regardless of my power, which I have none, God will show his power, and if it's something that needs to happen, it will. 100%. And this vision in my head is like translated so many different ways since the beginning. Like at first I thought it needed to be like this. I thought it was going to have to be like this. I wanted certain details to be a certain way. And then I kind of just said, you know what, God, I give it up to you. You are the one who brought me this far anyways. Like what's it going to take to just me give you a video? I'm like, that's not that big of a deal. I'll just give it all to you. That's something I'm focusing on today, is just praying to God every night anyway, saying I've killed myself 6 times. God, my life is no longer mine. It is yours. You light the path. I will follow that path, and I will go, because it is no longer my life to live.